All right. Here we go. Well, it's not ESPN's 30 for 30, but it is my 98 for 98. 98 seasons in the history of the New York Football Giants in 98 days. Now, I said probably not going to get it done in 98 days, but I'm trying to get it done before the beginning of the season starts, which is September 10th. So I should probably get that done before then. But we're forging ahead. We're halfway through the 40s already. The 1945 season would just happen to be the 21st season in the history of the New York Football Giants. This was, it seems like every now and then the Giants have a clunker of a season. They won the championship in 27, 28, they had a losing record. 32, they had a losing record. Then 33, 34, 35, they went to the championship game. 41, they went to the championship game. 44, they went to the championship game. 46, next season, going to go to the championship game. 45, they had a losing record. I mean, this was probably their worst season that they had. It was not a banner. They played only 10 games due to the war. They were 3-6-1, which was, I think, their worst record up to date. Fewest amount of wins. Now, a bunch of things, interesting things. It's like every year, there's always something different. Always, like different teams popping a lot. Sometimes different teams popping up. Some disbanding, some this, some that. 1946 is going to be the All-American Football Conference popping up. So one of the teams from the NFL is going to be going there. It was the Cleveland Rams. 1945. This would be their final season, and the championship game was played in Cleveland. So the final championship game that the Cleveland Rams will be playing. In 1946, they go out to Los Angeles. So a lot of things were going on. Also, the war was still going on. It just ended. The draft was once again 32 rounds. The Giants, if I read it correctly, had like 47 different guys playing on their team. I mean, that was by far the absolute most players that they had on their team for a whole season. What's up, Teddy? Rams house. Yeah. They did not have good attendance, I believe it was, and I think they moved out west to and they started getting good attendance. I mean, the weather was just miserable in Cleveland. They did not get very good. I think it was the attendance. I think there was a reason why it was the attendance. So the Rams moved out, but the Rams wound up prevailing in the championship games. They played the final game at home. The championship game that had a little interesting story to it as well. There's a few interesting stories going on here, but you're also going to start seeing things are starting to change here. 1944, the Packers were really good, and up to 1944, the Packers were really good. But after the Packers won the championship in 44, they wouldn't go back to the championship game until 1960. So they took a while off. The Giants would go to the championship game the following season in 46, because we're talking about 45 here, but the Giants went to the championship game in 46. The Giants had gone to a ton of championship games, but they'd go in 46, and the next time they would go wouldn't be till 56. The Bears went to a bunch of championship games. The Bears would be in the championship game in 46, but after 46 was over, they didn't go to the championship game until 1956 with the Giants. So they took a while off too. The Washington Redskins were in the championship game in 1945, and this was it for them until 1972. The next championship they had was in the 72 NFC Championship game. They beat the Dallas Cowboys 26-3 at home at RFK Stadium. That's that year the Dolphins went undefeated. The Redskins went to the Super Bowl. They lost 14-7 to the Dolphins in 1972. But you're going to start noticing things are changing. The Rams are going to start getting good. The Lions are going to start getting good. In the 50s. The Cardinals, Holy smokes. Yes, I said the Cardinals are going to start getting good. The Cardinals are going to go to back-to-back championship games and actually win one of them and actually win their only one coming up shortly. The Eagles are starting to getting good. The Eagles were very good 44. They were very good in 45. You noticing they're starting to come on. The Eagles are going to go to 3 straight championship games, 47, 48, 49. Yeah, as I said, you got the All-American Football Conference, which starts in 1946, because this is 1945 we're talking about, but in 46, the All-American Football Conference is going to start up. That's going to be there in 46, 47, 48, and 49, 4 seasons. After 49, it disbanded. A couple of the teams went to the NFL, and a few of the other teams just kind of, I guess, went away. But then out of there came the Cleveland Browns. And they won all 4 years in the All-American Football Conference, 46, 47, 48, and 49. All 4 years they won the championship. The quarterback was Otto Graham. Otto Graham went to 10 straight championship games, up to from 46 to 55. After 55, he retired. So things are starting to change. I said, because once 50 rolls around, that's when the Cleveland Browns enter the Eastern Division, where the Giants are at. And the Browns go to the championship game from 50 to 55, and then they went once again. It went in 57. Jim Brown's rookie season, from 50 to 57, the Browns went to every championship game except for the 56 one where the Giants went. So things are starting to change, because from 1933, when the championship game started in the Eastern Division, from 33 to 46, those 14 seasons. In the Eastern Division, only the Giants and the Redskins went to the championship games. The Packers and the Bears went to most of the championship games in the Western Division. But as I said, things are just going to start changing here a little bit. All right. What we got there? Merlin Olsen. Well, nice. My curse on Steve Young beat them 28 years in a row. Steve, yeah, good quarterback. Merlin Olsen, may he rest in peace. Number 74, I'll tell you what, weren't many better defensive tackles than him. He was phenomenal. He was really, really good. Didn't curse. He would just go in there, do his business. Absolute classy human being. All right, so we got the 1945 NFL season. All right, so the NFL season was started in 45. Okay, so it's the 21st season for the Giants. So it's the 26th season for the NFL, because remember the Giants started in 1925, NFL started in 1920, so the Giants are 5 years younger, I guess, than you want to call it, than the NFL. So the 1945 NFL season was the 26th regular season of the National Football League. The Pittsburgh Steelers and the Chicago Cardinals resumed their traditional operations. So this is 1945. 1943, because of the war, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Pittsburgh Steelers merged for 1 year. They became the Steagles. 1944, the Chicago Cardinals and the Pittsburgh Steelers merged for one season. They were just called, I think, Chicago-Pittsburgh. I don't know if they even had a nickname, to be honest with you. So they merged for one season. But now in 1945, once the war, World War II ended, it was either July or August. So once the football season started in September, World War II was over. All the guys were back from the war. That might quite possibly wind up being why there were so many players on the rosters, the Giants roster. Now they did have, let's say the draft was held on April 8th, 1945. Then once again, they had 32 rounds in the draft, I guess not knowing that, obviously April, May, June, July. So like 3 or 4 months later, the war would be over. But I guess they didn't know that for sure, obviously. So they had 32 rounds in the NFL draft to try to get a ton of guys into the NFL, because a lot of the other guys were at war. And so they wanted to make sure that each roster had, an ample amount of guys. But by the time they started the season in September, the World War II was over. All the guys came home. Obviously, some of the guys wanted to play some football and make some money. So that's why they said the Giants, if I counted correctly, had 47 guys on their roster. in 1940, which back then was a phenomenal amount of players. Let's see here. The remains of the final Ohio League member, the Dayton Triangles, then also known as the Brooklyn Tigers, and the Boston Yanks, they merged for one season. The combined team, simply known as the Yanks. That's why I love it back then. The names of the teams and all that is just, just crazy. They played 4 games at Boston's Fenway Park and 1 game at Yankee Stadium. After the Brooklyn Tigers owner, Dan Topping, announced his intentions to join the new All-American Football Conference, which would start in 46, his rights to the Dayton Triangles legacy franchise were immediately revoked after the season, and all of its players were assigned to the Boston Yanks, who carried on the team's lineage. The season ended when the Cleveland Rams defeated the Washington Redskins in the NFL championship game in Cleveland. And I said that one has a little story to it as well. So it's just kind of phenomenal how like either the season or a championship game, something has like these interesting stories to them. The draft, the 1945 NFL draft, was held on April 8th, 1945 at New York City's Commodore Hotel. With the first pick going to the Chicago Cardinals, they select halfback Charlie Trippi from the University of Georgia. Major rule changes. The inbound line or hash marks were moved closer to the center of the field from 15 yards from the sideline to 20 yards from the sideline. So from 70 feet apart, now they're only 40 feet apart. This remained the standard until 1972 when the hash marks were moved into the width of the goalposts, which were 18 and a half feet apart. So basically, from 1945 up until 1972, they were 40 feet apart, and then they moved them in another 20 feet closer to each other, or actually 21 and a half feet. The player who extends his arms under the center must receive the snap, or the offensive team will be penalized for a false start. When a snap is muffed by the receiving player and then touches the ground, it is legally a fumble. Okay. During an extra point attempt, the ball is automatically spotted at the 2-yard line. But the offensive team may opt to have the ball placed farther back from the goal line because, let's not forget, it's placed at the 2. They usually snap it back to about the 9 and it's a 9-yard extra point. That's all it is, because the goalposts are right on the goal line. So, sometimes some guys might maybe be able to kick field goals, but they may not be able to get it up right, as fast. So maybe they might want to move it back a couple yards. That way the guy can kick it, get it up. And by the time he gets up, it clears the crossbar. So we got division races. The Eastern Division, the Yanks were still unbeaten 2-1 as week 4 at their only Yankee Stadium game on October 14th. They had a 13-10 lead, but the Giants tied them 13-13. In week 5, the Yanks 38-14 loss to Green Bay, put them at 2-1-1, tied with the 2-1-0 Washington. While in the Western Division, the Rams reached 4-0 after a 41-21 win over the Bears. In week 6, halfway through the 10-game season, Boston and Washington both won, putting them even at 3-1-1 and 3-1-0 because ties didn't count. The Rams' 28-14 loss to the Eagles, along with wins by the Lions and Packers, tied all 4 teams at 4-1 in the West. In week 7, a blocked extra point gave Detroit a 10-9 win at Boston, keeping the Lions tied with the Rams at 5-1 for the Western lead, while taking the 3-2-1 Yanks to a game behind the 4-1 Redskins. In week 9, the Rams took the lead in the Western after a 35-21 win over the Cards, while the Lions lost 35-14 to the Giants, which was odd because the Giants usually have a hard time beating the Lions, and even odder because the Giants had a bad season. In week 10, the 7-1 Rams and the 6-2 Lions met in Detroit's Thanksgiving Day game. For the Lions, it was a must-win game, but they lost 28-21. Thus, the 8-1 Rams clinched the division and the right to host the championship game, because the odd-numbered years were the games, championship games, were hosted by the Western Division. The championship games officially started in 1933. The Chicago Bears hosted the first championship game, so they're the Western Division. So obviously 33, 35, 37, 41, 43, 45 was the Western Division. So anything with the even number, 1944. The Giants hosted the championship game. 1946, the Giants are going to host the championship game, right? So, let's see here. Days later, the 5-2 Eagles hosted the 6-1 Redskins. And the Eagles' 16-0 win tied both teams at 6-2. Ooh, very interesting, with 2 games to go. The next week, however, the Eagles lost to the Giants. Yes. 28-21, while the Redskins beat the Steelers 24-0. Steelers were bad. Steelers were 2-8. The Cardinals were 1-9. Those are the worst teams in all football that year. Let's see here. Washington 17-0 win over the Giants. The next week clinched the division. And I'm going to go over that game too. I mean, what a horrible game that one was for the Giants. We got the passing leaders. Sid Luckman passed for 1,727 yards. Steve Van Buren, the future Hall of Fame running back for the Philadelphia Eagles, led the league in rushing with 832 yards, which was, in a 10-game season back then, was very good. Receiving, Jim Benton from the Cleveland Rams had over 1,000 yards receiving, 1,067 yards receiving. Very good. Very, very good. In a 10-game season, he averaged, 106.7 yards receiving per game. Woo! But see, the Rams had they drafted themselves Bobby Waterfield the year before. Bob Waterfield was a very good quarterback. He could throw the football. The Joseph F. Carr Trophy for the most valuable player went to Bob Waterfield, the quarterback from the Cleveland Rams. All right, so then we have the NFL Draft. The 1945 NFL Draft was held on April 8th, 1945. So this was the 10th NFL Draft, because the NFL Draft started in 1936. So this would have been the 10th NFL Draft. It was held at the Commodore Hotel in New York City. With the first overall pick, the Chicago Cardinals select halfback Charlie Trippi, who is a Hall of Famer. Now, there's 5 Hall of Famers got selected in this. 4 or 5 got selected the year before. 5 got selected this year. In the first round, crazy Elroy Hirsch, Crazy Legs Elroy Hirsch of the Cleveland Rams and the Chicago Cardinals, Charlie Trippi, went to the Hall of Fame. Now, basically, to get parity, right? This is the way they've done it for the past 4 or 5 drafts, I guess it was. That maybe 4, because there's 32 rounds. There's a lot of rounds. Now, what they did, the first round, everybody selected. In the first round, the Giants selected number 10. They selected Elmore Barber, a quarterback from Wake Forest. What they tried to do to get parity is the teams with the 5 worst records from the year before selected in round 2, and that was it. So in round 3, the teams with the 5 worst records, once again, they selected in round 3, and then the teams with the best records also selected in round 3. Round 4, only the teams with the worst records selected. So it was just 5 teams in round 4 selected. And then once again, then in round 5, then they just started back as business as usual. Now, each team wound up picking 30 players, but it wasn't until the final 2 rounds 31 and 32, that the teams actually, it looks like the 6 best teams from the year before selected. So the Giants wind up selecting picks number 323 and 329, which wound up giving them 30 players that they selected for the year. I mean, 30. Could you imagine? We got 7 rounds now. They got 32 rounds. Oh, my goodness. Round 3, the Giants. I mean, I'll just do the top 10 rounds. Giants selected Gordon Appleby, a center from Ohio State in round 3. Round 5, the Giants selected Ed Castleberry, a back from West Texas State. Round 6, the Giants selected Barney Poole, an end from Ole Miss. Round 7, they took Jack Mead, an end from Wisconsin. Round 8, Giants selected Nick Vodek, a back from Northwestern. Then we have round 9, John Rudden, a back from Marquette. And round 10, the New York Giants took Vic Smith, a back from UCLA. So they were heavy into the backs back then. Took a lot of backs. All right, let's see. But the New York Giants, all right, yeah, they usually what wind up happening. Wake me up after 72 when you in Cincinnati. 72. Oh, we got a little ways to go, but we're getting there. We're definitely getting there. But usually what wind up happening is the Giants, when they had these clunker of a seasons like they did in 1945, their defense usually is what the year before they gave up, I think it was 85 points or 75 points. I'm sorry. They gave up 75 points in 10 games. They averaged 7.5 points per game. The defense gave up. They had by far the best defense in the NFL the year before. Not so much this year. This year they gave up almost 200 points. They gave up 198 points. They went from giving up 7.5 points per game to 19.8 points per game. Their defense just gave up a lot of points. Their offense wasn't too bad. They scored 179 points this season, so they averaged 17.9 points per game. The year before they had 206 points, so they fell off a couple points per game. But it was basically their defense that just got so much worse. And you'll see here by some of the scores, they just gave up a lot of points, way too many points. And it was kind of like a little Dr. Jekyll, kind of like Mr. Hyde. The Giants' passing offense was very, very good. They scored they had 16 passing touchdowns, and they had 16 interceptions, which back then was pretty good. Their defense, all right, only had 6 passing touchdowns all year. But the Giants' rushing defense was like the rushing defense the Giants had last year. It was just horrible. The other teams were just chewing up yards against the Giants. Now we look at the rushing. All right, so the Giants' passing was very good. The Giants had 16 passing touchdowns. They only had 6 rushing touchdowns all year. They gave up 17 rushing touchdowns. The Giants gave up 4.2 yards per carry, which I'll tell you what, back then was a lot of yards. 4.2, that was a lot of yards back then. So that was one of their big problems. I mean, way too, and they only averaged 2.7, I believe it was, yards per carry. I'm sorry, they averaged 2.4 yards per carry. If they ran the ball 4 times, they still wouldn't even, on that average, they still wouldn't even get in the first down. So their rushing was horrible. They had 6 rushing touchdowns. As I said, they gave up 17. They gave up 164 yards a game rushing. They only got 77 yards a game rushing. They gave up over 1,600 yards rushing in a 10-game season. That's really, really bad. Their rushing defense was really, really horrible. As I said, the rushing offense was just very, very bad. Let's see. They kicked 6 field goals. They gave up 6 field goals. Their extra points were very good. Ken Strong was 23 out of 23. Very, very good. As I said, they scored about as many touchdowns as they gave up. So there was really nothing, nothing super spectacular. The offense did a decent job. I mean, their offense, if their defense was better, the Giants could have maybe contended. Their defense was just absolutely horrible in the final season. 1945. Now, if we start the season, usually the way the Giants start off is they start off on the road. That's because they're sharing the polo grounds with the New York baseball Giants, and they want to basically make sure, I believe, the baseball season was over with, and any possibility if the Giants baseball team went to the World Series would be over with before the Giants football team took over the polo grounds and started chewing up the field. So the Giants, once again, the first 2 games of the season, it was always at least their first 2 games. They started off on the road, and it was no different here. They first two games. First game of the season was October 7th. We started in October. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they started on the road against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They won 34-6. Things are looking good. Well, then the next week they played the Yanks, as they were known for, and they tied them 13-13. They were on the road. They tied the Yanks 13-13. So now the Giants are 1-0-1. But then basically their season ended. They lost their next four games and pretty much put themselves out of contention. The first game of the season at home was on October 21st. Pittsburgh Steelers came to town. Giants lost 21-7. The next week, the Washington Redskins came to town on October 28th. The Giants lost 24-14. So now the Giants are 1-2-1. The following week, Sunday, November 4th, at home, the Cleveland Rams came to town. The Giants lost 21-17. So now the Giants are 1-3-1. And then they went on the road on November 11th, and they lost to the Philadelphia Eagles 38-17. So they're 1-4-1 with 4 games left. Their season's over with. They finished, they went 2-2 in their final 4 games. The following week, the Detroit Lions came to town. The Giants won on November 18th at the Polo Grounds. They won 35-14. So now they're 2-4-1. The following week, the Green Bay Packers came to town. And on November 25th, the Giants lost 23-14. The following week, the Eagles came to town. The Giants would prevail 28-21. So now the Giants are 3-5-1. So they have one more game left. It's on December 9th on the road against the Washington Redskins. And basically, it was just for pride. And the Redskins won 17-0. The Giants had 4 first downs. They had a grand total of 62 yards of offense. They had 27 rushing yards, 35 passing yards, 62 yards of offense for the whole game. They had 4 first downs, no points. Meanwhile, the Redskins had 17 points. They had 19 first downs. They had 446 yards of offense. They had 296 yards rushing. So the Giants basically playing for pride. Just playing for pride. The Redskins were playing pretty much for all the marbles because they had to win that game to make sure that they would win the division. So they won that game. They won the division, right? And that's what they did. And they just ran all over the Giants, basically, literally. So the Giants season ended 3-6-1, which was not a good season. However, 1946 would be a much better season for the New York Giants. But we have the 45 championship game. 1945 NFL championship game was the 13th annual national championship game held on December 16th. The Cleveland Rams defeated the Washington Redskins 15-14. It was at Cleveland Stadium. There was 32,178 people there. This was the only championship game up until this point, which was played in Cleveland. This is the only Rams. Basically, from 1933 to 1946, there was only 6 teams that went to the championship games. The Rams went to 1, the Lions went to 1, and all the other ones from the Western Division was either the Packers or the Bears. In the Eastern Division, it was only the Redskins and the Giants. From 1933 to 1946, those 14 championship games, the Giants and the Redskins went to all of them. But they said after 46, things will be changing. It was the coldest NFL championship game up to that time. The temperature was -8 degrees. -8. Which significantly curtailed the expected attendance and revenue. Yes, that was one thing. Also hurt the passing game because Sammy Baugh and Bobby Waterfield are known for passing. All right, so we got the game, and this was the game right here, the first quarter. The Redskins had the ball at their own 5-yard line, dropping back into the end zone. Quarterback Sammy Baugh of the Redskins, playing in his 5th championship game in 9 years, threw the ball, but it hit the goalpost, which were on the goal line from 1933 to 1973, and bounced back to the ground in the end zone. Under the rules at the time, this was a safety, which gave the Rams a 2-0 lead. In the second quarter, Baugh suffered bruised ribs and was replaced by Frankie Filchak, who threw a 30-yard touchdown pass to Steve Baggaris to give the Redskins a 7-2 lead. The Rams scored just before halftime when rookie quarterback Bob Waterfield completed a 37-yard touchdown pass to Jim Benton. Waterfield's ensuing extra point was partially blocked with the ball teetering on the crossbar, but it dropped over to give Cleveland a 9-7 lead. Now that one, that it doesn't matter. I mean, even if I heard it was like teetering. Somehow got blocked, landed on there, and somehow teetered, and then it fell over. So I'm not sure if they're exaggerating that a lot. I'm not sure how a ball would just land on a crossbar and kind of teeter back and forth before it fell over, but that's the way the story goes. So the Cleveland Rams had a 9-7 lead at halftime. There's 2 points. In the third quarter, the Rams increased their lead to 15-7 when Jim Gillette scored on a 44-yard touchdown reception, but this time the extra point was missed. But the Rams are still winning by 8 points, which back then is 2 scores. The Redskins then came back to cut the deficit to 15-14 with Bob Seymour's 8-yard touchdown catch from Frankie Filchak. In the fourth quarter, Washington's kicker Joe Aguilar missed 2 field goals attempts of 46 and 31 yards. 46 is a long one back then, but 31 yards. He missed a field goal attempt of 31 yards. That could have won the game. But it was the first quarter safety that proved to be the margin of victory. After the game, Redskins owner George Preston Marshall was so incensed at the outcome that he became a driving force in the passing of a major rule change after the season. A forward pass that strikes the goalpost is automatically ruled incomplete. This rule eventually became known as the Baugh-Marshall Rule and remained in effect until 1974, when the goalposts returned to the end line and were impossible to hit with a legal forward pass, which made the rule a dead letter. So in the third quarter, the Redskins scored a touchdown. All right, and want to make the score 15-14. Nobody scored in the fourth quarter, so the final score was 15-14. So basically, that blocked extra point that the Rams had that teetered on the goalpost. If it didn't teeter over, the score would have been 14-14. Now, I'm not sure what it would have been if they would have played overtime or not. Because the year before, there's Elmer Layden, the commissioner. He said that if the game ended in 1944 championship game, if the game ended in a tie, both teams would be declared co-champions. There would be no overtime period. So if the extra point here for the Rams that was blocked, that teetered on the goal post, if it didn't fall over, if it fell short and the game ended 14-14, I'm not sure if it would have been declared a tie or if they would have gone to overtime. That I don't know. But we have the players' shares. Total revenue generated by the championship game total $164,000, which included $15,000 for the radio broadcast rights, which was a new record. Of this total, $95,261 was allotted to the players, resulting in shares of about $1,409 per player for the victorious Rams and $902 for the losing Redskins, which back then, $902, 1945, if you lost, that's a lot of money. It's good for them. But the Rams relocating to Los Angeles. Despite winning the World Championship, Rams owner Dan Reeves lost $64,000 with his franchise during the 1945 season. These financial losses, combined with the Rams' poor home attendance and the awarding of a Cleveland franchise, the Browns, to the soon-to-be-formed All-American Football Conference, ensured the relocation of the Rams to Los Angeles in January 1946. So that's why, that poor home attendance for the Rams, and not only they have a poor home attendance, but they also awarded the Browns the All-American Football Conference, and the Browns wound up being very popular. They were very successful. So if the Rams lost $64,000 in 1945, they probably would have lost even more money if they kept staying there. So So it was just a matter of time before they had to just wind up moving. So that's how the Rams were the first team to basically. There was the Los Angeles Buccaneers in the 20s, but they weren't. They played on the road. They were not located in Los Angeles. I mean, they didn't play home games in Los Angeles. So the Los Angeles Rams in 1946, they moved out there. So that's when they moved out there. Today, ball can still hit the goalpost on any pass in 2023. Ohio's finest moment. Rams protect. Steelers will win in the Central, never the East. That's right. You got that right. But so the Rams won. As I said, you're going to start seeing things are changing. The Eagles are going to start dominating soon. The Giants are going to the 46 championship game. They won't be going for another 10 years after that. The Bears are going to the 46 championship game. They won't be going for another 10 years after that. Once the Browns come into the league in 1950, they're going to start going to a bunch of championship games. The Eagles are going to start dominating. The Redskins won't be to another championship game till 1972. So times are changing. The Packers went to the 44 championship game. They won a bunch of titles. They went to quite a few championship games. But after the 44 championship game, they won't go to another championship game till 1960. They won't win another one till 1961 with Vince Lombardi as the head coach. So things were changing. But the 1945 season for the Giants was by far pretty much their worst one, especially win total wise. However, the 1944, they went to the championship game. 1945, 1946, they go back to the championship game. So there's still better times ahead for the New York Football Giants. All right, well, Teddy, good talking to you, buddy. Good talking to you. I'll be back again tomorrow night. So that pretty much wraps up the 1945 season for the New York Giants. So I'll be back again tomorrow with the 1946 season of the New York Football Giants, which was much better, which just happened to be the 22nd season in the history of the New York Giants. I'll see you then.